Namaste. I am Bhanudaya Upadhaya, and it's my privilege to welcome you all to the second season of The Voyage, a podcast series undertaken by the Kathmandu University School of Management in association with the World Trade Organization Chess Program, Nepal. This season, we are diving into topics that matters to students, entrepreneurs, and change makers. Today, we have with us an exceptional guest who embodies the spirit of dedication and global impact, Sir Dr. Ratnakar Adhikari. He is the executive director of the Enhanced Integrated Framework at the World Trade Organization. He is also the chairman of South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, Kathmandu based regional think tank, working tirelessly to empower least developed countries to thrive in the global trade ecosystem. A proud Nepali, Dr. Adhikari's incredible journey spans academia, policy advisory, banking, and multilateral organizations, making him the pioneer in the field of international trade and development. Let's get ready to explore his inspirational journey, know the key insights of global trade, and discover how our young minds can contribute to shaping the future. Hello, sir. Welcome to the voyage. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. While we were working on the questions, um, we thought you had such a wonderful career, and you have gained a great experience in your life. So the questions that we were making, it's all from the perspective of students and especially business perspective. So the so your journey from a lecturer at Tribhuvan University to the executive director at the EIF highlights resilience and vision. You've worked across academia, banking and international trade policy, shaping global discussions on development. So the first question that I'd like to ask is, where did you grow up and what was the childhood like? I grew up. Thank you very much for this question. I mean, one does not get asked this kind of question, and then this is very personal. And I appreciate that. So, what happened was that I grew up in a place called Lanchar in Kathmandu, and I studied in Santi Vidyamaya School. And then just across the road, I was Amrit Science Campus, Oscar, right? So then I wanted to become an engineer. I wanted to study science. So, but then in SLC exam at that time, I didn't get good mark. Then I couldn't get admitted to a science college. And I went and chose the profession of business, commerce. I um, uh, started with ICOM at the public youth campus in Dovi Kola, Dovi Chor actually, Dovi Chor. Vichar. And then, from there, I went to Delhi University for my BCom honors and then did my master's and then came back. Such a great experience. It is wonderful to know how you have like such vivid experiences and in your life. So, what initially drew you towards international business? And as a student, were you always like, this is where I should go? Were you always headed in that manner? Good. As a student, yes. When I was doing my BCom honors from the university, so I thought, I would do masters focusing on international business. And then I chose actually international business as one of my subjects. Although my more inclination was towards economics and other topics, as well as corporate law and whatnot. But then I thought, my expertise would lie in marketing, international business, and all of those activities. Then when I came to Nepal, I started teaching at Saraswati campus. Then the first subject that I taught was managerial economics. Okay. Then, after 3 months, I was given another assignment to teach marketing management, where there was a lot of important elements of international business. So, and then I taught there for 6 years as a part-time sort of teacher. But I was doing other things. I had started my career in the bank, and prior to that, I had also worked with an NGO called Leaders. So that's how I started, and then I started liking it in a way. So that's how I got drawn into international business. The intricacy of it, the geopolitics of it, the kind of a strategic element that you one has to take into account, the other aspects which are really fascinating, and then I got drawn into that direction. What we think as a young person doesn't always have to be like, if we feel at one thing, it doesn't matter a lot in the long run, isn't that the thing? Exactly, exactly. What you dream as a child, may not become a reality. I was thinking of my daughter, who is now becoming an architect. She was thinking that she would become a teacher. So, and if you ask her today, she would say no. I mean, I never said that, right? So, but we have a record of it anyway. So here's the thing. So the way my career moved was that, of course, I was working for the teaching at the university, Saraswati campus, but at the same time, I was working for this NGO on environmental issues. Then when I joined the then Nepal Industries Bank Limited, now it is called Nepal Investment Mega Bank, but then that time it was run by a kind of a French, it was a French joint venture, the part of Banque Industries and then later become Credit Agricole Bank. So it was that joint venture initiative. So when I was working there, I got in touch with somebody called Pradeep Mehta, actually from India. And then this is quite remarkable because he wanted to organize a South Asian event here in Kathmandu in December 1994. And it was just one month before the creation of the WTO. So WTO agreement was already signed in April in Marrakesh that same year, 1994, and then WTO was going to come into being, sometime in January, January 1995. So that time we were actually having a conversation, and it was not only a conversation; it was kind of a symposium focusing on the what is called pains of transition, impact of globalization and liberalization in South Asia. So I have another NGO outfit that I co-founded called ProPublic, Protocol for Protection of Public Interest. So that organization was represented in that conference, symposium. So I was there. And then that was the time everybody thought that there would be a need to safeguard the interest of South Asian countries as well as to provide, you know, the necessary capacity to the South Asian governments and entrepreneurs to take advantage of WTO, right? So therefore, we decided to set up this organization called South Asia Watts and Trade Economics and Environment as well as network. So that time we had five organizations representing five major countries in South Asia, including Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Then that's how we started as a Loot Network. Initially, it was headquartered, or the secretariat was based in Calcutta, in India. And then in 1997, it was decided that the secretariat should move to Kathmandu for three reasons. One was that the since it was a South Asian organization, and South Secretariat was located here. So that was one reason. Number two was the fact that it was very difficult to organize any event, a South Asian event in either India or Pakistan, because Pakistanis would not be able to come to India. Indians would not be able to go to Pakistan. That one was considered a neutral venue. And the third reason, I was still young back then, and then they thought that I should be the one managing it. Since I was based in Kathmandu, so they decided to entrust the responsibility of managing Swati to me, and then I brought it to Kathmandu, and then I had a small office set up in ProPublic, the organization that I co-founded in 1991, and then we started from there. Then when we had like bigger projects, bigger ideas, and bigger vision and everything, so we moved out. And then we established our own office in South Asia, Watson Trading Division in Environment. We got it registered in 1999. So that's, and then since then I became a kind of a fascinated with the issues such as trade, investment, and internationalization of business. So what I was doing was teaching, right?
Yeah.
And then here was an opportunity for me to
actually implement some of these ideas, to do in-depth research on some of these ideas, and to build capacity of young people to get acquainted with the matters relating to WTO and everything. So that was quite fascinating for me.
True, sir. Thank you so much for that wonderful insight into the formation of Swati and also your journey into the international trade. So, as you mentioned, at that point of time during the 1990s, as India also opened its border to international trade and globalized its economy during the 1990s. So, at that point of time, what was the global trade environment when you began,
Mhm.
and how did it transform over the years?
It was like in the international arena,
Yeah.
there was something called Quad Group. I don't know whether you are aware of that, and it's a bit of a
No, sir.
technical term, but let me break it down for
Yeah.
you and for our audience also. So, the Quad Group comprises the US,
Hmm.
the European Union, Japan, and Canada.
Hmm.
So they were the ones who used to sort of set the tone for discussion and negotiation at the WTO initially. But then things started changing after China's entry into the WTO,
Okay.
in 2001. So that was a kind of watershed moment, in the history of international trade, and particularly international trade regulation, right? So then after that, China became a prominent player, and then Canada and Japan, they are still formidable player, but then they, in terms of the negotiating um, power or negotiating capacity, and everything, the other countries became important, right? And then India also became very assertive. Then other countries such as South Africa, Brazil, Mexico, other countries also became very, very prominent player, right? So that's in the negotiating arena at the international trade regulation level. But at the same time, that was the time when we focused mostly on goods trade.
Hmm.
Now we are talking about services trade. Services
True.
are actually growing much higher than the goods trade, right? So therefore, it has now transformed into an era of trade where it is dominated by services trade, green trade, you know,
Hmm.
inclusive trade,
True.
digital trade. Those were things that they were unthinkable, for example, back then. So things have transformed quite significantly, and things are transforming as we speak, evolving as
True.
we speak. So with the advent of fourth industrial revolution, particularly artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, and other kinds of technology, uh, things are actually evolving quite rapidly, and the future of trade would be fundamentally different to what it was in 1990s.
Thank you so much, sir. That
You're
was
welcome.
a really good insight we got into the trade and international picture of trade at that point of time. Let's delve into the topic of EIF, Enhanced Integrated Framework. And the EIF empowers the least developed countries to better participate in global trade, addressing challenges like capacity building and policy reform, as we know. My question to you here is, what are the key factors that determine whether an LDC can successfully use trade for development or not?
Sure. LDCs can successfully use trade for development, uh, if certain conditions are fulfilled, right?
Okay.
So, for example, there are several LDCs that have done extremely well. Cambodia is one example, Bangladesh is another. Then we have countries in Africa such as Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, and then in the Pacific you have countries such as Vanuatu, Solomon Island. They have also used trade as an engine of their development. So, but then in order to do so, you need to have the capacity to trade, right? The first fundamental thing that one needs to understand, and this would be probably easier for your audience, particularly the young students to understand, is that countries belonging to LDC category, they have the market access opportunity, meaning that in theory they can export to any country in the world without having to pay any custom duty or without having to face any kind of quota, right? But in order to convert market access into market entry, they need to build their capacity. They need to build capacity on three fronts. One, in terms of analyzing what are the opportunities and challenges for the countries, to conduct evidence-based analysis in order to understand the challenges and design policies that help them to address those challenges as well as take advantage of opportunity. That's number one, right? Number two is the institutional capacity. They need to have the necessary institutional capacity to be able to provide a conducive environment for trade. If they have a good trade facilitation measure, they would be able to trade better. They would be able to trade in a competitive manner. Then if they have, let's say, the sanitary and phytosanitary certification or technical barriers to trade certification scheme in place, they have the lab, they have the testing facility, they have the accreditation and everything, then they will be in a position to trade better because their quality would be certified so that, when they export, their goods don't get rejected. That's the institutional bit. And then when it comes to the final point, that is the productive capacity building. So productive capacity building becomes important in the context of the fact that many LDCs do not know how to produce, actually. Even if they do produce, they are unable to be competitive in the global market because their costs are high. In order to address this challenge, they need to invest in four areas. One is the skill development of workers. Number two is the infrastructure. Number two in the technology and innovation. And number four, yes, of course, trade facilitation and other kinds of facilities, so that that would allow them to be in a better position to not only have the surplus left to be exported, but then those surpluses that they want to export are so competitive in the global market that they could even compete with the likes of China and Vietnam and India. So that is important for LDCs. And we at EIF are providing all three kinds of support to LDCs.
Okay.
So with the limited resources that we have been allocated by our donors, we have been able to support 51 countries altogether. And these include not only 44 LDCs, but those who have recently graduated from LDC categories such as Maldives, Samoa, Vanuatu, Bhutan, and others.
Yeah, true. Thank you, sir. So, as you mentioned about the donor countries, like those who provide the basic requirements to the LDC countries, like the basic requirements. So, what are these requirements, and who are these donor countries?
So when I say donor countries, there are two types of donor I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
One is that donor countries who provide preferential market access to LDCs. European Union, classic example. European Union provides what is known as Everything But Arms initiative. So this initiative, which initiated in 2001, literally allows each and every LDC to export their products to the European Union market duty-free, quota-free, right?
Okay.
It's not only one example. Canada, Norway, Switzerland, and other countries also provide similar kind of facility. But the European Union is well known, right? And it's the largest market in the world. So and many LDCs still export, and they are the major buyer of LDCs products. So that's one. The second one is these are the very countries and few other countries also who provide capacity building support. And in order to provide capacity building support, they provide resources, financial resources, development aid. And what we know now is called Aid for Trade, because this initiative started in 2005 since the Hong Kong Ministerial Conference of the WTO, and then it took off since 2007. EIF itself started in 1997, and it was called Integrated Framework. And then since 2008, 2009, it became Enhanced Integrated Framework. And it has already completed 2 phases of the program, and it is now in the process of designing the 3rd phase. So those are the kind of donors we are talking about.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Um, Now let's have a look into our country, and let's talk about Nepal's global trade path. Nepal faces significant trade challenges, as we know, but has potential, especially in the sector of tourism, agriculture, and digital services. How can Nepal address the challenges of an open, porous border that it has with India while maximizing its benefits for trade and development? How do you look at it?
Right. So, I mean, those areas that you have identified, you have correctly identified those
True.
areas. And then in some manufacturing sector
Yeah.
also, but then those are niche products that Nepal would be able to export, provided there's a kind of the environment is conducive. The reason I'm saying this is that, given the small size of the economy, small size of the country, small size of the market, Nepal may not be able to produce in volume and compete with the likes of China, in India, and
India.
Vietnam. So therefore, it has to focus on niche market, and then there's opportunity on the manufacturing sector also, and those are the three areas are very, very important. Now, what you've asked is that we have the open border with
yes, sir.
India. So we also have a bilateral free trade agreement with India, right? So one of the challenges Nepal faces is that Nepal cannot compete with heavily subsidized products coming from India. I'm not saying that India is like subsidizing on everything and also crossing the WTO limit for subsidies, but then a farmer in, let's say, Punjab province of India, who is provided with free electricity or a subsidized electricity to irrigate their field of 1,000 acre, producing wheat or rice there. If they are obviously going to be at least 1.5 times more competitive than the Nepalese producers,
True.
right?
Yeah.
So if you treat the goods coming from India, agriculture goods in particular, coming from India, and goods in the Nepalese market or produced by Nepalese farmers at par, then the farmers in Nepal would not have any opportunity to compete in the market. So what is, I mean, there's fundamentally, fundamental reassessment of Nepal in their trade treaty is required, whereby currently there is a provision for reciprocal market access on agriculture products, primary products, which includes agriculture products, right? But it was protected by the fact that, Nepal used to impose what is known as other duties and charges, around 10% or even more than that before it became a member of the WTO. And then this had provided some kind of protection to Nepalese farmers. And after the becoming a member of the WTO, the ODC, I mean, other duties and charges were phased out. Once they were phased out, now they have to compete. Nepalese farmers have to compete directly with the Indian farmers, which is very, very challenging. Unless and until we provide subsidies to these farmers to compete with Indian farmers. But this is something we cannot do. We don't have the fiscal space to provide that kind of subsidy. So the only way forward is to have a relook at the agreement, revisit the agreement, and then see treaty and see how we can renegotiate on that particular part, and then we are able to provide certain level of protection to Nepalese farmers. That protection word itself is sometimes it is not considered in good light, but at the same time, when there is a need for a limited period of time in order to build the competitive capacity of the weaker or vulnerable producers, then the state has to step in, and the state should be in a position to provide that kind of protection. And the WTO principle allows that kind of protection, so there's no problem at all. So that is what is required when you are talking about the porous border, right? Border bilateral free trade and porous border has also resulted in what is known as informal trade, and then studies that have been done, on the informal trade of agriculture products as well as manufactured product actually shows that at least the real trade is probably 1.5 times or even double the size of the recorded trade, right?
Hmm.
So that actually poses a challenge, and that is something that we have to manage by strengthening our security system, strengthening our custom administration, and strengthening our capacity to more monitor those illegal trade activities, and also uh, penalize those people who are involved in those kind of activities.
So you mean like, should the authorities like take stringent actions to these trespassers who are like involved into the informal trade activities? Like,
Yes, yes.
should there be strategies implemented in Singapore? Like Singapore also was a, it is dynamically and strategically differently located, but then we see like the strategies that Singapore implemented for its development was very stringent. Like they had actions, they took some actions that were like very difficult for the people to bear at that point of time, but then it the results of it is very good now. So should Nepal's uh, authorities also take some kind of actions in that manner?
I mean, not exactly like Singapore. I don't know how it was done, so I'm not an expert on that. Maybe they have done it, for if you throw garbage on the street, you are still fined.
Yeah,
I
true.
mean, that kind of strictness, requires a discipline at the highest level of government. And Lee Kuan Yew, as a leader, was considered kind of Iron Man, so he was able to do it. He was able to enforce it. He had the kind of vision that he was required, and he had provided enough incentive to the government officials also, in a way. I mean, good salary and benefits for the government official. You know what he said once. So when the government salary was increased to the almost to compete with the private sector, so somebody said that, oh, this is a bit too much. Then he said, if you pay peanuts, you'll get monkeys. So therefore, you have to pay them, well, in order to have them operate in their full capacity, or even deliver more than 100%. So that kind of commitment, I think, is required. So I don't know whether we have that kind of commitment, but what I can always say is that, and this is something that I have also been advocating for, that informal trade needs to be checked. It might be good for consumers, right? But it is terrible for the producers, right? I mean, of course, you have to balance that interest, but at the same time, it is not only terrible for the producers, but also the revenue lost for the government. So I mean, in a way, on the balance, this is something that has to be policed, in a kind of a stringent manner.
Thank you so much, sir, for that insight. So as a person working globally but rooted in Nepal, how do you view Nepal's prospect of graduating from the LDC status?
Well, Nepal, this is my personal view,
Okay,
and
sir.
I feel that Nepal should graduate now in 2026, right?
Yes,
But
sir.
then the kind of preparedness that is required for us to graduate from the LDC category, we have not yet reached there. And this is something that we've been raising, and my own organization, SOTI, has also done some studies on this. So there are several challenges that Nepal is going to face, and the first and foremost challenge is that they would not be able to, particularly our exporters would not be able to get the duty-free, quota-free market access in many countries. In the European Union, they would provide this support. They will continue to provide support for another 3 years period. But then beyond that, what can we do, right? So here I can provide you examples of few countries which I have actually looked at very carefully. And some of these supports were provided through my own organization, EIF, and I can give you three or four examples. One is the example of Cambodia, which would be graduating in 2027 at the earliest, or even 2029. It has already started preparing. Actually, Cambodia started first pre-graduation study. They conducted the study in 2016 through the EIF support. And in 2018, when they conducted the analytical work or diagnostic trade integration study, they had a full-fledged chapter on graduation, and they knew what they wanted to do. Cambodia is a country that has actually joined the WTO at the same year. Actually, Cambodia and Nepal signed the protocol of accession exactly at the same time in September 2003 in Cancun, Mexico, at the WTO Ministerial Conference, and Nepal became a member in April, and Cambodia became a member a bit later in 2024. So it was September or October. Now, if you look at the trajectory, Cambodia's export at that time was $2 billion, to begin with in 2004. Now it has reached 22 billion. Its investment at that time was roughly 360 million foreign direct investment was mobilized at that time. Now it has been mobilizing consistently investment worth 3 billion plus every year. The stock of investment back then in 2004 was 3 billion. Now it is 40 billion, right? So this is because of the vision of the leader. I mean, of course, one can argue about other things, but then in terms of the vision, economic vision, the leader had the vision, and they moved ahead. They did very well. Cambodia's example comes to my mind because they know that they are graduating soon. In order to diversify their market, and not to rely so much on European Union and US and other markets where they are exporting, they have signed bilateral free trade agreement with China, with Korea, with UAE, United Arab Emirates, and they are in the process of signing with two other major partners, India and Japan. And they are part of what is known as RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which encompasses all the 10 ASEAN countries, including Cambodia. And then you have Australia, New Zealand, China, Korea, and Japan. And India was also meant to become a part of it, but they withdrew at a later point. This massive regional trading arrangement, so they can export through these channels. So that's where Cambodia has been aggressively pursuing the market diversification opportunity. Second example I want to provide is that if I enhancing your trade facilitation, of custom formalities, the border related hassles, if you reduce the time taken, then you would be in a position to better compete in the international market. Your product becomes cheaper, because right now if you are paying, let's say, if you're not paying anything to enter European Union market, for example, some of your products would have to pay 12% duty in the future, right? But then therefore, you need to be more competitive in the global market. One way to reduce that sort of cost of transaction is to enhance the efficiency of a custom system. UNESCAF has done a study, and they have found out that if these countries, graduating countries, apply paperless trade principles, meaning like there's no paper required. Right now what happens is that in many countries you are required to submit. Even in Nepal, I don't know exact number right now. The last I checked was 11 documents were required to be to export products to international market, and 11 documents means like 33 signatures. So in order to collect that, it takes so long to export. So if you reduce that and then apply the electronic system, digitalized trade system, paperless trade system, then you would be able to eliminate those sort of barriers. So if you can reduce the time taken, let's say for the export of products from 90 days, if it takes 90 days, down to let's say 70 days, then you would be able to make a significant saving, which is close to 16%. I'm giving you an evidence because according to a study done by David Hummels of Purdue University, each day saved on trade is equivalent to 0.8% ad valorem tariff. So which means that if you are able to reduce by 20 days, then you literally saved 16% in tariff. So, and that's a system that has been applied by, let's say, Vanuatu. What they've done is we provided them initial support. From the biosecurity certification that they used to issue, it used to take 6 days. Now they have reduced it to 10 minutes. 6 days to 10 minutes. Now look at the saving that they are making. So this is one example, biosecurity certificate. There are other certification which would probably take 12 days, and that can come down to 10 minutes or 20 minutes. That because of that, they are able to significantly reduce their trade costs. And this is a model that we can follow in Nepal also. Second one. Third one. Another disadvantage of the graduating, being a graduated country, is that you may not be able to receive as much concessional or grant related financing in the form of foreign aid from donors, right? But then you can't rely on foreign aid forever, right? You have to graduate from that also. And the best way to graduate out of that is to attract foreign direct investment. So in order to attract foreign direct investment, Bhutan is a case in point. What they have done is to create an e-portal for, they have what is known as e-regulation portal, where they have put in all the necessary requirements, policies, laws, and formalities that need to be completed in order to invest in Bhutan. And they have put it on their website. It's transparency of the system, right? And they have also given number of days that would be required to process application. So this actually system was supported by us. And it was launched in November 2020 at the height of COVID-19 pandemic. Despite that, by the end of 2022, they were able to mobilize investment worth 350 million US dollar. So that includes foreign investment as well as local investment. So because of the transparency of the system, so that is another way of attracting foreign data. So that can also be done. So there are many ways through which we can navigate through the challenges of LDC graduation or Nepal graduating out of LDC group in 2026. But we need to have the necessary political will to do that.
So it was a lot that you talked about, and it is very true that graduating is one thing, and the whole process in which one should work, in which one should take the right kind of steps towards graduating, is another. Similarly, Nepal is a country with a lot of political turmoil, and how do you think a good and a stable government plays a part in this?
Good and stable government plays a major part, actually. And I'm not advocating in favor of a kind of a non-democratic, governments, because democracy is the foundation
True.
of our civilization. Actually, I would say I would go to the extent of saying that. And then democracies have done much better in terms of economic prosperity than in non-democratic environment. But there are many countries where political stability have sent the right signal to the foreign investors to invest. And not only foreign, local investors as well. So political stability is fundamental to the successful integration of Nepal into the international trading or international economy. I would say not only trading system but international economy. When I talk about international economy, we need to talk about investment. We need to talk about trade. Of course, we need to talk about the foreign aid and all of that, and we need to talk about exports of not only goods but services also. For all of these, political stability is very, very important, right? So therefore, I think there's no denying that political stability is not important. But at the same time, the countries such as Cambodia, Bangladesh, Rwanda, Senegal, Vanuatu, few other LDCs or recently graduated countries have done extremely well in the face of the global challenges they faced. For example, in 2007, 2008, we faced the financial crisis, right? In early 2020, 2021, we faced the COVID-related crisis. But those countries that have invested heavily on building productive capacity are more resilient compared to others, right?
True.
So therefore, it is important. But I'll just give you one example of in a West African country called Togo. So there we've supported an initiative for the production, enhancing production and productivity of soybean, right?
Soybean.
As a result of our intervention back in 2015, they had the total production was 25,000 metric ton, and there was very limited export. So limited that we don't even have the data. We don't have the baseline data. Now, in 2023, they have increased their production to 300,000 metric ton, 12 times. They have increased their export in 2023 was 121,000. 121,000 metric ton was exported. As a result of the excessive production capacity, some of the foreign investors, including one Indian company, has set up a factory there for the processing of soybean, and they convert them into soya oil and export to various countries in Asia, including India, Pakistan, and China. So the lesson there is that the government out there has remained throughout committed to the process of supporting this sector, and they have provided better facility for producers and exporters and everybody. And that political stability since 2015 has helped in the past 8-9 years for one product to sort of thrive in the international market. And they are currently the largest exporter of soybean, organic soybean, to the European Union market. So that's the kind of transformation I've seen. And that transformation was made possible because of political stability, and political stability provides policy stability, and which was there.
So it all boils down to how the policymakers are able to implement it via the stability at the central, whereas at the base level as well. Thank you so much, sir. Now let us shift towards the crux of the whole matter, that is the youth, and talk about youth engagement and the trade opportunities. Nepali youth, especially in business, are keen to explore global opportunities in areas like e commerce and intellectual services. So, my question is, what steps can organizations like the EIF and the WTO Chairs program, as we know, take to engage youth and make trade policies actionable?
Right. So, So what we've done, actually, I'll come to to respond to your question towards the end, but at the same time, what we've done in this space, because we know for a fact that e-commerce or digital trade is an area where the youth's presence would be critical, and they have done extremely well. Even in the case of Nepal, let me start with this. IIDS has done a study back in 2022. A study was published last year. In 2022, apparently $515 million worth of IT products and BPO services were exported, right? Digital services, so-called digital exported. So that's a huge sort of opportunity. And then most of the people who are involved in that were between like age 20 and 29. So youth, significant youth present. But we also realize that e-commerce provide an opportunity for democratizing the trade system. Those who do not have much resources, such as micro, small, and medium enterprises who would not be able to compete otherwise in the global market, can also compete through e-commerce or digital trade. Women entrepreneurs would be in a better position to actually compete in the global market if they get necessary support. What we've done is to conduct what is known as e-trade readiness assessment. We supported UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. UNCTAD, this organization is an UN body, and they started what is known as e-trade readiness assessment, and we provided support to 9 LDCs, including Nepal, to conduct those assessments, to identify what are the challenges, what are the barriers. Are skills the barrier? Are infrastructure the barrier? As policy or regulation the barrier? Are trade facilitation measures the barrier? Are access to finance the barriers? Right. So we looked at all of those and then provided recommendation. But we didn't stop at that. We provided support to these countries to implement some of the policy actions. So beyond that, we provided support to, let's say, Cambodia, Senegal, Nepal, Bhutan, to prepare their e-commerce legislation and develop their e-commerce strategy. In Senegal as well. So that's what we've done. But then one significant example that I would like to share with you is that in South Asia, we partnered with UNSCAP in South Asia and South West Asia office based in New Delhi to provide capacity building support to 500 women to begin with, 500 women entrepreneurs to begin with on digital trade. So we actually provided them training on e-commerce as well as digital marketing. And given the fact that the project started actually at the time when the COVID also started, because we didn't anticipate that, so we did everything online, and as a result of which, we ended up actually providing capacity building support to 2,500 was our target, 2,062 women. And these women, one of the major benefits of that is that these women, when they started engaging in training activities, they started sort of exchanging sort of their contact and everything. Now they have started B2B transactions. So now exporters, women entrepreneur from Bhutan is exporting to India. From India, they are exporting to Bangladesh. Bangladesh is exporting to Nepal. Nepal is exporting to India. So that's the kind of benefit, spillover benefit that we received from the project. So, and it's quite inspiring in the sense that this is an area, right, where youth can sort of get involved and then be able to utilize the knowledge and skill they have gained in order to participate in international economy.
True. So also you talked about like the basic skills like digital training and everything. Also, could you like specify any 3 skills that is very much needed in today's youth to compete in the international market? Like Nepali youth, they want to compete. Like they say that there is they have the capacity, but they don't know where to head towards. So, what are the 3 important skills that they must have?
One is the negotiating skill. The negotiation is the fundamental principle of business. I mean, it's not only for the diplomats, who negotiate trade agreements in Geneva or international treaties in the United Nations, but negotiation is important for business, right? I mean, if you have the right kind of negotiating capacity, you would be able to get better deal, right? Sometimes you have to know where your strength lies, and on the basis of that, you negotiate, right? So that's the number one.
Okay.
Number two is that the marketing skill is very, very important. If you know your products, and if you know the unique value proposition of your product, you would be in a position to market your product well. Even if targeted sort of marketing opportunities that you can take advantage of, let's say you participate in a trade fair, then if you are able to market your product better, package it, label it, and then showcase it, then have discussion with your potential buyers, and then if you are able to convince them, and then you would be able to get the first order. And once you are able to get the first order, then you have to be able to get the higher order. But at the same time, it is important, and the third skill is to maintain the consistency and quality of your product, or goods or service, no
Anything.
matter what. So if you become complacent that you have received an order for like $3 million, and then that would sort of take you to up to the end of your life, then you are mistaken, right? So you have to have that ambition, but at the same time you have to maintain the quality and consistency of your goods and services in order to be able to sustain in the global market. Entering the global market is probably difficult, but then it's much easier than sustaining your presence in the global market.
True. So the 3 skills are negotiation and marketing. Focus on the 4 P's that we say, and then third has to be to maintain the consistency Thank you so
thankful.
much, sir. So, with this, we come to the end of this section, that is youth engagement. Now, let us focus on future of trade in Nepal. And Nepal has untapped potential. We don't know what lies ahead of us. So, there are three things that I'd like to ask. We have already discussed three of the factors, but there are like, in terms of goods, services, and intellectual property, where do you see the future of Nepal's economy?
Services, number one.
Okay.
Goods, number two.
Mhm.
Intellectual property, it's not mainly for trading. I mean, of course, it's a part of the WTO system. So, I mean, we tend to bundle all of them together. But intellectual property is about, providing the necessary protection
Mhm.
to your products or services that you export to the global market. That's it. So, for example, Nepal particularly does not have that many intellectual properties anyway registered. So, if you look at the entire intellectual property, 7 different categories of intellectual property, I don't want to name them. Trademark is number one.
Mhm.
Why is it so? Because there's rampant violation of trademark. So people just register trademark right, left, and center. But what about the other forms of intellectual property? Patent, we have
Yeah.
very limited. Even geographical indication is another
Mhm.
form of intellectual property,
True.
such as champagne from France or Scotch whiskey from Scotland. These are geographical indication. But in our case also, Badgaonli topi or Palpali Dhaka topi, or these things can become our geographical indication. But then we haven't done so
Mhm.
that much, right? Copyright and other forms, they are also important, but then very, very little. So therefore, I think it is essentially about two things. Of course, if you want to sort of import certain technology, then you should respect their intellectual property. You shouldn't right, left, and center, start copying them,
True.
or reverse engineer them like other countries used to do in the 60s and 70s. So that's one. But then now let's come back to services and
Goods.
goods. In terms of services, I told you about the digital
Digitalized.
services,
Yes.
digitally delivered services,
Mhm.
business processing, business process outsourcing, IT exports, and all of that. These days, even because of the fact that many data entry kind of work, data scrubbing kind of work, are done in Nepal for major artificial intelligence technology firms are hiring Nepalese companies such as Cloud Factory and others to do the
Yeah.
work, right? So that is already happening, but we need to strengthen that bit. 550 million is the figure, and that is, I don't know. Of course, this was done through a kind of a rigorous study. Maybe it's even higher than that. So we have to get that,
Mhm.
get that figure, and on the basis of that, we should provide necessary incentive to the entrepreneurs, to the youth of this country who want to get involved in international business, to get hooked into the digital trade space. So that's another. In terms of digital, services trade, the tourism also remains
Yeah.
important
True.
part. Medical services, and we have a great potential. So India is actually now using medical tourism as a kind of a potential opportunity to attract foreign tourists to come for medical tourism. That's another. Religious tourism, pilgrimage tourism, mindfulness tourism. See, what happened in Bhutan. I don't know whether you are aware of that. So Bhutan, actually, government has now created a mindfulness city.
Okay.
They have actually declared mindfulness city, which is a place close to Indian state of Assam, bordering Indian state of Assam. So now they are providing all the necessary facility for people to come and meditate, people to spend like weeks and months together, and then be able to sort of use that environment, the atmosphere, and the facilities out there, so thereby attracting quality tourism into the country. So that potential also exists. I mean, other than that, as long as Mount Everest and Lumini as the major tourist spot actually remain here in the country. Uh, so there's a tremendous potential.
True, sir. Thank you so much, sir. That was really insightful, and those were some of most of the topics that we wanted to discuss. Now we boil down to the final segment of the whole podcast, and in this segment we have personal insights and reflections. This in this segment we are not going to talk about trade. Beyond work, personal passions. How do you balance your life?
I actually, personal passion, I love traveling.
Okay, so
So, I must have traveled to, I mean, I lost my count, but then must have traveled to more than 80 countries so far. I mean, work partly because of work and partly because of pleasure. Then it provides me an opportunity to feel for myself, what lies there, in the country. For example, I visit a country, I talk to the people, I look at their history, I get the opportunity to get acquainted with their culture and everything. Then every travel I take it as a learning opportunity. So that's kind of something that I enjoy doing. So I also try and manage my work life balance is very, very
true, sir.
important. So that's something that I do. I also read. I mean, not an avid reader like many of you, but I read books that are inspiring, that have shaped the global discourse. For example, on artificial intelligence.
So that was my next question. To be
Hmm.
very honest, like, could you recommend your favorite books or any book that influenced your outlook of life or work?
Actually, the one that influenced long time back, I don't remember, but the last book that I read and which I found quite illuminating, just before joining the EI, when I was doing my PhD, is the book by
Paulo Coelho.
Paul Collier called The Bottom Billion.
Okay.
So Bottom Billion was a kind of a book that's quite inspiring, and then that has actually influenced my thinking when I was actually working for the Enhanced Integrated. I have still been working for the Enhanced Integrated Framework. Uh, so there you understand, the root cause of conflict, lies in deprivation, and this 1 billion, people who are at the bottom of the pyramid. uh, it's like a time bomb actually. um, so waiting to be exploded. It's something the book actually author has also put a lot of emphasis on internationalization, trade, and then having a good rapport with your neighbors in order to take advantage of their development. So I mean, the benefit that is the spillover benefit from good neighbor, the all of those important insights were there. But recently, I mean, not that recently, but then these books by uh, Noah Hariri,
Oh yeah.
Sapien, and then the Homo Deus. All of these books have also influenced my thinking on how human society has evolved to adapt new technologies such as artificial intelligence. I was so much influenced by the whole notion of artificial intelligence that I actually took a course, on a certificate course from University of Oxford Side Business School on artificial intelligence. Actually, I ended up doing that, and I have started actually writing on the fourth industrial revolution, looking at the whole range of issues, relating to accessibility, affordability, and application of technology, and how LDCs can benefit from those technologies.
Thank you so much, sir. The Bottom Billion by Paul Collier, right, sir? Okay. and you talked about sapiens as well. And thank you so much, sir. Um, as the last question, I'm so sorry that I'm asking so many
No
questions. I'm
problem
really,
at all.
I'm like a child here, like trying to grab as much information that I can from you. So your journey has been very inspiring, but as a message to all my audience, all our audience of the podcast, what advice you'd like to give to our youth who'd like to contribute to the global trade and policy?
Conviction,
So,
dedication, and resilience. These are like three important things in life. I mean, of course, if you don't have conviction, you won't even do much. But then, you know, just having a conviction and then having a cup of coffee, and then chatting with friends, doesn't make much of a difference. Then you have to have the dedication. But then now it is important to be resilient as well. I would have said something else, but then resilience has become so important for a number of reasons. And I've told you my story, like an open book. See, when you plan something and
hmm,
it doesn't work out, I mentioned in the beginning, then
hmm,
you always have a plan B ready.
true.
Sometimes having a plan B is a bit of a challenge, because if you have a plan B,
Hmm,
then it weakens your negotiating power.
true.
It weakens your resolve,
Hmm,
right? Because you want to do something and then you're going to move along in a particular path, and then if you have a plan B, you say, okay, if I'm not able to do that, then I will move to no. Dedication is equally important.
true.
But then dedicate yourself, but don't over dedicate,
Hmm,
so that you actually reach to a situation where you get depressed and all those things. So what you really need to do is to have a plan B, and then you have to always you have to be in a position to understand what lies ahead in terms of risk and how to mitigate this risk. And if you are able to identify and mitigate the risk, and then even on the face of growing challenges, if you are able to sort of get back to the original situation you were in, prior to the crisis kind of a situation, then you become resilient. So that is actually fundamental to our life, in the current context, current international context, current geopolitical context, current national context, current context of climate change, as a result of which the disaster and other elements of this negativity or crisis are recurring time and again. So therefore one has to be resilient as well.
Dr. Adhikari, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you with us this evening. Your insights into global trade, Nepal's potential, and the role of youth is truly invaluable. We're confident our listeners, especially business students and the young professionals, will find your journey, thought, and your message inspiring. Thank you for sharing your time and perspective with us. We are delighted to share this platform with you. As a token of appreciation for you to join us, we have a token of love. And with this, we come to the end of our podcast. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
having me.
Thank you so much, sir.
Such a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.